Hi everyone, welcome back to Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris back with my rant stroke thought of the day. And surprise, surprise, it's all about PSR. That's right, PSR, the deflator of dreams, the miserable addition to football that nobody really wanted, nobody asked for, certainly not fans, is here to stay by the looks of it because the Premier League have voted for this horrible ruling to continue at least for another year. And I've got a few issues with this. I'm going to get stuck right into it in a minute. But it's very hard to understand. I mean they've totally destroyed the simplicity of football. You know, when you used to talk about who would be a good signing for the club, or I like him, we should sign him. And then people would go, oh, where would he fit in the team? Would he work well with this player? You know, what are his strengths and weaknesses? That's all been completely ruined now, thanks to the horrible monetization of this greedy Premier League ran by Richard Masters and his bunch of bastards. And all people talk about now is money and finance and FFP and PSR. You know, but I hate it, absolutely hate it. You can't have a football conversation anymore. You feel like you're having a fucking mortgage review. Life's miserable enough with enough financial, you know, responsibilities and anxieties to take the fun of signing players away from your football club. But well done, Premier League. You succeeded in doing that. And we all know what PSR and FFP was introduced for anyway. It was to protect that small cartel of clubs, some of which have rallied against you now, which is why we're in a position where the whole financial regulation of the Premier League is more fucked. Going back to FFP and PSR, the whole thing's a fucking mess. It really, really is. I'm trying to look at it and understand it. You know, I'll save that to experts like Kieran Maguire, who will probably have no spare time in his diary at all at the minute because everybody want to ask him about financial regulations, and he's great at it. He's a top bloke. But I'll do my best to kind of muddle my way through it. So basically, the thought process is that PSR and FFP were going to fuck off from whence they came, and they were going to be replaced with something called squad cost rotation, or SCR. These fuckers love an abbreviation, there's no doubt about that, to be put into the new rulings, but also with TBA, another fucking little acronym there, with anchoring, which would give you, I think, 5 times the value of what the bottom club was paid out by the Premier League for TV revenue and so forth, which I think worked out 100 million, I think was the bottom club's payout. So say 500 million would be the anchoring figure. Now, why has this been voted against and who has voted against it? But if you do a little bit of looking into it, and again, like I say, it does my nutting. You know, we're all worried about money these days. I'll get into the PFA in a minute because that's just completely blew my fucking mind, to be honest with you. But looking at the whole situation, the current model of FFP and PSR, as we know, is that clubs are allowed to make losses of 105 million in a 3-year period. It's prevented loads of clubs from spending. It's resulted in clubs like Everton and Forest being fined, Leicester as well being punished by Premier League, suing the Premier League, successfully winning that court case. Manchester City have currently got a court case going against the Premier League, and also Manchester City are still pushing their APT or ATP, I can't remember which fucking way it's round. You know what I'm talking about. They're pushing that in a further legal battle with the Premier League, which is, I think, resulted in these rules now being delayed, which is what is the word going around the rounds. That could just be the Premier League making an excuse for it, but that's the reason apparently why these rules have been delayed. But the current PSR and FFP rules will remain. So again, it'll prevent clubs from spending, worrying about losses, worrying about fines, having to sell, you know, academy graduates like Elliot Anderson, you know, players you've picked up for fuck all in Yankuba Minter for 30 million quid. You know, what would our squad be looking like now if we kept those 2 players? You never know. You never know. It might be better. You know, who knows? We could be 3rd or 2nd in the fucking league for all we know. But this is the problem. Eddie Howe's got a real issue with this, having to sell your academy graduates because it's 100% profit. You know, people are talking about selling Louis Miley. No fucking way. This kid's got a massively high ceiling at Newcastle United, and he should be at the club for years to come. We shouldn't even be thinking about selling this player. But loads of other clubs have had to sell assets. They don't want to sell. Cole Palmer's a prime example from Manchester City. They sold him for chump change, really. He's gone on to become one of the best players in the Premier League. But the issue that we have now with PSR and FFP, and I think the reason that these rules have been delayed isn't just the Manchester City court case. There's other things underneath the surface here. So the new SCR rules allows a club to, or the new ruling is that you're able to spend 85% of your annual revenue on football costs, which is players, transfer fees, agent fees, wages, those kind of things. Now, if you start crunching some of the numbers, Manchester United's annual revenue, for example, is 661 million or something like that. And so their annual losses, or so their kind of SCR ceiling, if you will, would be around about 561 million. However, the anchoring and the TBA that comes in then stops them going above, say, 500 million. So they're already losing 60 million off the ability to spend either on a transfer or wages for a player. So of course, people at Manchester United are going to vote against this. They've got a second highest wage bill, I think, in the league at 172 million quid. They've got loads of players on ridiculous amounts of money. Fernandez on 300 grand, Casemiro on fucking 200 grand, whatever it may be. Rashford on 300 grand. He's now been loaned out to Villa. Villa are another club as well. They're sailing very close to the win, but I'll get onto Villa in a minute. I've got a bit of a conspiracy theory about Aston Villa, which, I hope isn't right, but, I can't help but be cynical with all of this. But you look at Manchester City, have got, I think, a wage bill of 220 million or something daft like that. These clubs don't want the SCR ruling to come in because they're fucked. It means they can't increase the wages of their players. So somebody else comes along, like Real Madrid, for example, and wants to buy Erling Haaland and pays him more money than City are paying him. They could lose him because they can't challenge it because SCR has strangled them. Manchester United the same. They can't increase any wages. They don't feel they can be competitive against other big teams in Europe against players. Now, if you look at that from a Newcastle United point of view, which is what we're more interested in, Newcastle haven't spent in the last 3 windows. Everyone's talking about a big summer. Now, there's 2 ways to look at it. The SCR delay could help us, maybe go and spend more money on players, get, bigger salaries and all that kind of stuff because the PSR is still in place and we haven't spent for 3 windows. So our PSR will be in a better situation, in terms of towards losses. Then the SCR rules comes in and we'll have prize assets we can maybe cash in on and move the money in between the books. I kind of understand that. But Newcastle United's wage to revenue turnover at the minute is quite good. I think we're in something like the 68th percentile. So we've got room to maneuver, room to wiggle. Whereas clubs at Manchester United, Man City are fucked. They're really, really close to the knuckle in terms of the, the football cost. They've got nearly 180, 200 million quid's worth of wages wrapped up in players. So they can't go and sign other players on massive 300, 400, 500, 600 grand a week wages because it's not going to happen. Now, the biggest person who kicked off about all of this was the PFA. So the PFA kicked off and they aren't happy with this because they look at this situation as a wage cap. Now, just parking the whole thing about football clubs for a minute. The fact that the PFA are trying to play the smallest violin in the world for people who earn 80 to 500 grand a week is fucking grotesque in a world where people are struggling to put their fucking central heating on and feed their kids. These arseholes on behalf of their clients who are mega rich millionaires, never mind the money they get from endorsements and all the other shit in the background, just like kicking a piece of leather around the grass. These motherfuckers get 200, 300, 400, 500 grand a week. So excuse me for not shedding a tear for you rich bastard players who are pissed off you can't get even more money from these football clubs while the fans are getting fucked with high ticket prices, loads of kit getting sold every other week. How many fucking shirts has Newcastle sold this year? They've got a Carabao Cup final shirt coming out, which I think is fucking mental. For starters, don't buy it because if we lose, you'll want to burn the fucking thing in the back garden crying with a whiskey neat in your hand. And secondly, you don't need to sell that shirt, Newcastle United. You're just fleecing your fans again. But this is my point on the PFA's argument. It's absolutely fucking grotesque. These players earn way more money than they'll ever spend in their life, 10 lifetimes. And it's fucking minging. They've got £5,000 watches, 400 grand fucking cars. God knows how much the houses are worth. You can't argue the case that this is a wage cap against these players. It's absolute bullshit. It's not like they're a Sparky or a fucking joiner on a site, looking for an extra £2 an hour. These guys are paid ridiculous amounts of money. That argument carries no weight for me at all, and it's bullshit. It should be called out for what it is. Bullshit, grotesque. Read the fucking room, PFA. You're way out of line with that one. And so are the players as well for kicking off about that. Fuck them. That's disgusting. You get great money to do what you do for a living. Is it hard work for you? Of course it is, physically, mentally, flying around the world, your first class airplanes and all that kind of stuff. But you get paid very, very well for it. And don't fucking forget that. The people who come to watch you don't get anywhere near what you get in 10 years worth of wages if they're lucky, maybe more than that. So this is a massive detachment for me from football players, the PFA, and the people who make the game matter, which is the fucking fans. But going back to the whole argument about the rules being delayed and everything else, little mini rant there. But this is a weird setup. I mean, the Premier League have totally lost control of this completely. Aston Villa argued a while ago that the 105 million should be increased to 138 million. And I think that is a fair argument. The 105 million has not risen with inflation. You can't buy anything that you bought 3-4 years ago for the same price. Bread, milk, a car, a house, nothing. It's all more expensive. I saw something on social media a while ago where it said a 3-bedroom detached house, I think in 1998 was 50 grand. You'd be lucky to get one for 300-400 grand now, depending on where you live in the country. It's ridiculous. The Premier League think they can keep that figure in place and not rise up with inflation is utter bullshit. So that's a real fuck up from the Premier League. They've lost control of this whole thing because of that. That's why they're having to fine clubs, and then they're letting Manchester United slide the COVID years when they weren't posting the losses because they were claiming a loss of revenue, and the Premier League let them get away with it. We won't forget that kind of a shit. The whole Super League argument as well. A lot of these greedy 6 clubs that the Premier League built FFP and PSR to protect were going to fuck off to the Super League as well. So it's a complete and utter clusterfuck shambles of a situation. I don't know what the hell is going to happen with it. And I don't know whether it's good or bad for Newcastle. I really don't. I see both sides making an argument, and you can understand it. But Newcastle have to go big in the summer and at least add 2 or 3 players to the squad. I've seen some people saying with the delay to SCR, we might be able to add another 2 or 3 players to that squad because we don't have to worry about the kind of 85% annual turnover thing. But the only way you're going to get around this as a football club in Newcastle United's position is if you increase the annual revenue. And I know I've just said don't sell shirts and all that shit, but the way they increase the annual revenue is significant. He's getting sponsors in, get a training ground sponsor in, get a training shirt sponsor in, get people in to sponsor the football club to hoy in 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 million quid or whatever it is over 2 or 3 years. That's how you increase the annual revenue of the football club. Don't just fleece the fans, in a really difficult area of the country where cost of living is hard for a lot of people and employment is high. People are up to their neck in debt. Don't just whack 80 quid shirts out every 2 fucking weeks and fleece this fan base. Stop exploiting loyalty. It's a brilliant campaign. And I think the Premier League clubs need to fucking look at it. Do they care about it? I don't think they do. They'll say they do for good PR, but I don't think they give a fuck. And Newcastle United at the minute doesn't seem to be any different. We are being driven by commercial businessmen who are very successful at what they do. Fair fucks to them. They've got themselves in a really good position to get paid what they get paid because they produce returns and they've got great CVs for it and brilliant. But that doesn't coincide with supporter affection or affinity or empathy or anything like that either at all. It doesn't. These two worlds collide quite regularly because it's just the easiest thing to do is to pass on to the fans. The ticket prices we've seen are grotesque in football clubs, getting more and more expensive. Kickoff times getting rescheduled for TV, leaving people stuck in the likes of London to try and get back to Newcastle where the last train out was at 9 o'clock. They have to pay for a 200 quid a night hotel. It's ridiculous. The cost put on football fans is getting worse and worse and worse. And they're getting priced out. And what will happen is you'll kill the atmosphere in the stadiums. I was lucky enough to be at the Arsenal game, and the atmosphere there was incredible. If you kill that out of a football club and you replace it with, the prawn sandwich brigade, as Roy Keane famously said, all that noise level, all that stuff goes. I saw the state of the Manchester City crowd. It was against Real Madrid where some guy was getting a fucking haircut in the crowd, which is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. There was no cheering, there was no screaming, there was people out on mobile phones. Yes, there was massive parts of the ground that were doing exactly the other, but this is the problem. You price real football fans out of going to games, you lose your atmosphere as well. But this whole situation has got totally out of control by the Premier League. They either fucking admit the SCR thing ain't going to work if they want to keep the big cartel happy, but they need to rise the 105 million quid cost with inflation, in my opinion. That should be 150, 160 million quid standing on its fucking head losses. And that'll stop teams getting points deductions. But the SCR thing, the big clubs don't want. So the Premier League are really up against the fucking wall now, and they're going to be under pressure to make a decision. We still don't know what's going to happen with the Manchester City court case with the alleged 115 charges. If they get off that scot-free, then that tells me that maybe it's open season for the likes of Newcastle United to spend and get away with it because there is no punishments, whether it's FFP or SCR. But going back to the point I was going to raise about Aston Villa before I close the video, this is what fucks me off. Newcastle played by the rules in this whole situation. They played by the FFP PSR rules. They didn't go and buy anybody in January. They needed 2 players in January, in my opinion. Right winger, certainly, maybe centre-half cover as well. And they didn't get either of those players. We haven't been active for the last 3 windows. We haven't added a first-team player for the last 3 windows because we're trying to do things right so we can have a big summer. Had we known that this shit was going to get delayed, we might have went and got a couple of players because it wouldn't have mattered, because the SCR 85% to turnover thing wouldn't have mattered. And it makes me wonder, the reason that Aston Villa made that last splurge, that last late move to get Marcus Rashford on loan, Asensio on loan, Big fucking salaries those guys are on. Yes, Manchester United paying a large part of Rashford's salary, but if they sign him for 40 million, they'll have to pay him a good 200-300 grand a week. Asensio will be on big money as well. Aside Marlon as well. These players, did Aston Villa get some kind of a fucking tip off here that this thing was going to be delayed? Because all of a sudden, seemed to come out of nowhere, almost as if something was said and boof, off went Villa and got these deals done. With the rest of the Premier League in the dark about these rules being delayed, that's a fucking conspiracy theory question I'd like answered as well. Because if Newcastle had known this was happening, why didn't they make a move for a couple of players? And also, to end this video, if the SCR thing's been delayed, get that fucking deal signed for Alexander Isak, put him on 250 grand a week and get the fucking thing done. Because if it's being delayed for another year, then why give a fuck? If Aston Villa are going to reap the benefits, we should as well. But let me know what you think about the changes to these rules. Who do you think the clubs are who voted for this in favour of this? Is probably a lot more than you think. Actually, how do you think we voted as a football club? And what do you think it means for Newcastle United if you understand it, if you get it? It's very, very difficult to understand. I'm struggling to understand it myself. But, do you think SCR is better for Newcastle? Or do you think an increase in PSR and FFP is better? Or would you rather have none of it? I know what my answer would be, none of it. Just let us spend. If you're lucky enough to have rich owners, you're lucky enough to go and spend. That's what Manchester City did. That's what Chelsea did. And that's how they transformed themselves from nearly teams to teams that were winning everything. But Newcastle haven't got that luxury. We won the lottery, but the money's locked away in a fucking bank vault thanks to the corrupt Premier League. But keep it ever more, guys. Like and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts. We'll be back with some more content soon. Have a belter. We'll see you later. Cheers.